President Trump toured a new Boeing 747 jumbo jet at Palm Beach International Airport in Florida.
Boeing, once a symbol of American military greatness, has been hit by global politics, with China advising its airlines to stop taking new Boeing jets due to Donald Trump's 145% tariff on Chinese goods. American companies are grappling with rising tariffs and fierce competition, and the country is losing its legacy companies. Boeing's 737 MAX jet, intended for Chinese airline Xiamen Airlines, has returned to the U.S. production hub after being hit by bilateral tariffs launched by President Trump. Boeing has announced its plan to transfer part of its manufacturing to Mexico, which is no surprise, as many other legacy companies are taking the same route. The main reason for this move is tariffs, which analysts predict will increase costs in the aerospace business by about $5 billion annually in the coming years. This is because of the tariffs imposed on Canada and Mexico, two major players in the North American supply chain. Boeing imports critical components like electrical wiring for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner's landing gear components and interior parts from Mexico, as well as avionics composite materials and engine components from Canada. The company cannot achieve 100% domestic manufacturing, and even Tesla cannot either. Trump's protectionist policies were meant to protect American manufacturing, but they are hurting it in a way he did not see coming. More CEOs are coming out to mirror Boeing's sentiments on the issue, such as Ford CEO Jim Farley, who said that the cost will rise because the company is dependent on the North American supply chain. The tariffs are complicating the North American supply chain as the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, signed into action during President Trump's first term, reduced and eliminated many tariffs and trade barriers in the North American region. The trade agreement was supposed to reduce reliance on non-North American auto parts, and vehicles would be more or less duty-free when traded across these three countries if they complied with the rules. Boeing's chief financial officer stated that the direct effects of the tariffs on the company will be minimal, with the cost increase on metal prices amounting to less than $1. Boeing, a major US-based aerospace company, is facing a 1% increase in company spending due to the impact of tariffs on its supply chain, which is primarily concentrated in Canada and Mexico. The company's manufacturing is highly dependent on just-in-time supply chains, which aim to minimize stockpiling and reduce storage costs. However, Trump's punitive tariffs are being met by retaliatory tariffs, with countries like Canada imposing 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods. Boeing has been experiencing a tough time in 2024 and early 2025 due to a panel blowing off a 737 MAX 9 plane. This led to slowed production in their plants and a loss of $355 million in the first quarter of 2024. This year, the company recorded a $31 million loss. To address this, Boeing has been aiming to streamline its manufacturing process and reshape its portfolio to concentrate on core businesses. CEO Kelly Ortberg confirmed that in April, the company had 3 airliners ready for delivery in China, but 2 were returned to Seattle because Chinese airlines that had ordered them canceled them as a result of the tariffs. Beijing also imposed a 150% import tax on American goods in retaliation for the 145% tariffs imposed on Chinese goods by President Trump. Boeing had planned to deliver 50 aircraft to Chinese airliners, but is now forced to look for prospective buyers in other regions. The aerospace industry maintains that it should be exempt from these tariffs. As President Trump said, the tariffs are meant to reduce the U.S. trade deficit by cutting imports and encouraging domestic production. The introduction of these tariffs threatens this status and brings about uncertainty in aircraft delivery. The aerospace sector is the second largest export category after oil and gas, and in 2025 alone, its exports are expected to reach $1.35 billion. The company's performance in the past few years has been affected by these trading regulations, and the company is now looking for prospective buyers in other regions. The Trump administration's trade policies have created complexities for American manufacturing, forcing companies like Airbus to adapt to the global landscape. The U.S. remains the leader in high-tech industries, such as aerospace, automotive, and defense, which favor outsourcing and offshoring production. However, the global manufacturing landscape is evolving significantly, with giants like India and China speeding up production with technology and automation, leading to increased dependence on each other. Airbus relies on around 18,000 suppliers worldwide who produce roughly 80% of the aircraft to manage tariffs. The company has the option of using its U.S. factory in Alabama, but this puts it in a vulnerable situation. Countries not affected by U.S. tariffs, particularly those in Asia and Europe, are taking advantage of the higher price tags on American goods. In Europe, Airbus has emerged as a fierce competitor for Boeing, taking over its market share for commercial and military aircraft. This could lead to a shift in market dynamics, with Airbus A320 and Neo becoming popular in Asia and Europe. Boeing is concentrating its efforts in the U.S., while Airbus is getting access to emerging markets in Latin America, the Middle East, and Asia. Airbus already has a plant in Mobile, Alabama, which means the company has a way of bypassing Trump's tariffs if Boeing produces its aircraft in the U.S. If this trade war intensifies, Airbus, operating with lower production costs and fewer trade barriers, will eventually capture a larger market share than Boeing. Lunch costs in Mexico have implications for American workers, as aerospace companies like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon have traditionally provided high-paying engineering jobs. With rising costs, these companies are outsourcing these jobs to Mexico, leaving American workers jobless. While some workers understand that companies must react wisely in an environment introducing economic pressures, others see this as a betrayal. The trade regulation, tariffs, and global competition are creating a complex environment for Boeing, as they have to deal with higher production costs, disruptions in the supply chain, and increased competition from companies like Airbus. Ford has halted shipments of its best-selling vehicles, including the F-150 Mustang and Bronco, to China amid rising U.S.-China trade tensions. The auto industry is now rewriting itself as an economic warfare, with Ford's response being a strategic pullback to see if the conditions become more conducive. The company has adjusted exports from the U.S. to China in light of the current tariffs, affecting the F-150 Raptor, Mustang Bronco SUV, and Lincoln Navigator. Ford CEO Jim Farley said Trump's tariffs are making it almost impossible to remain competitive in China's massive car market. However, Ford is still shipping auto parts like transmissions and engines to China, including the popular 3L engine made in Lima, Ohio. Analysts project that American automakers will incur an additional $108 billion by the end of 2025 if the 25% tariff is not lifted. This move will dig a hole in Ford's profits, as it sold $900 million worth of cars in China in 2024. Buick, a subsidiary of General Motors, is facing challenges due to a 25% tariff on foreign-made cars in the U.S. The company manufactures vehicles in South Korea, China, Canada, and Germany, with models produced in South Korea facing up to 27.5% tariffs when entering the U.S. borders. Chinese-made Buick cars will incur up to 150% tariffs. Buick's global operations are strategically located across continents, with assembly strategically located across continents. In the U.S., Buick's market share increased from 8% in 2022 to 1.1% in 2024, and it is projected to increase to 1.6% by the end of 2025. Analysts say the tariffs are derailing Buick's momentum and even threatening its survival. Buick has not commented on the issue, but plans may be underway to shift some production back to the U.S. In the worst-case scenario, the company could shut down its U.S. market, similar to Ford's halting exports to China. The American auto industry may face good news if President Trump reverses the trade war with China, as cars are about to get more expensive in the U.S., and some may even be pulled from the market entirely. Tariffs are aimed at both companies and customers, and many people will feel the heat when companies start increasing their prices. As the cost of buying a new vehicle increases, people are choosing to stay with their old vehicles, leading to shortages and increased demand for used cars. This will drive up the cost of new vehicles and also affect auto parts, as many replacement parts are imported. This means consumers cannot afford routine maintenance and unexpected repairs. U.S. automakers, such as Buick and Ford, are relocating manufacturing from the U.S. to streamline operations and cut costs. However, Trump's protectionist policies do not seem to protect domestic companies, and it is only a matter of time before other companies follow behind. Other countries, such as the European Union, have imposed retaliatory tariffs on U.S. automakers, such as Ford, Stellantis, and Tesla. This could leave the U.S. behind in electric vehicle adoption, as components needed for EV batteries are not found in the U.S. Concerns about competition from China are weighing on American lawmakers and auto companies. Chinese automakers, such as BYD, are expanding rapidly, selling over 1 million electric vehicles, EVs, in Q1 2025, with international sales up by 140%. This vertically integrated powerhouse avoids disruptions to U.S. timelines and profit margins, making it a potential competitor. Chinese automakers are also positioning themselves for global expansion, with brands like BYD, NIO, and XPeng becoming popular. In Europe, American car brands have not been spared due to stricter emission regulations, while China, particularly in countries like Norway, Sweden, and the Netherlands, has seen a rise in EV adoption. However, Trump's protectionist policies may negatively impact the American auto industry in the long run. There is still room for discussion, with South Korea and China seeking policy changes and concerns, but the real-life complexities of tariffs remain to be seen.